All right, y'all, tell the truth. This is a pretty important question, and I need you to be honest with yourself. I need you to be honest with me. I need you to be honest with God and the person that you may or may not share a bed with. Do you snore? Do you snore? Yeah, I see some raised hands, okay? Some of you should be raising your hand. You're getting nudged right now, right? Do you snore? Let me see a show of hands. You think, yeah, I definitely snore. All right. Let me share a show of hands that you say they should have raised their hand. The person, yeah, okay. Well, studies show that 57% of men, around 57% of men, do snore, right? At least occasionally, okay? At least occasionally. So this ranges from anything from like I saw some serious laws, like wake up everybody in the house, I can hear you within a quarter-mile radius, all the way up to like every once in a while. And I do that. I do that. I am an occasional snorer, especially when my allergies hit me. I mean, I got to go to another room. There's no way that my wife can sleep whenever the allergies hit me. Okay, so there's that one. Around 40% of women do the same. Way to go, ladies. Good job. Yeah. But this many people snore, and around a quarter of all of these people are snorers. Like about around a quarter of all of these snorers are like habitual snorers, we'll put it. They are very often snoring. They're the ones who will make you leave to go to another room. So all that being said, let's say this. Not everybody snores, but because enough people do snore, we know that it shouldn't be that big a deal. And even though not everybody snores, I do think that we all have some kind of quirks in our sleeping habits. Right? You know what I mean? Like we all have some type of quirk to the way we sleep. You may not snore, but let me ask you this question. Are you one of the people that kind of moves your legs a lot when you sleep? You know what I'm talking about? Those people, they may as well be retrievers, golden retrievers or something. They're just like sitting there doing this in their sleep. Yeah, some of you are like, no, I don't do that at all. Yeah, you definitely do that. We know who you are. You're those people. Or maybe you talk in your sleep. Anybody talk in your sleep? Being honest. I love that. I'm a sleep talker myself. So you're in good company, maybe. We like to talk in our sleep. We have so much to say during the day. We don't get it all out, so now we got to do it at night. My dad he promised me, he said, I could carry on a conversation with you when you were a kid while you were sleeping. Like down the hall, is talking about the same thing over and over and over again. So maybe you don't talk in your sleep. Maybe you don't run your legs. I used to know people who would kind of scream out in their sleep, like they're having night terrors, but they really weren't dreaming about anything crazy. You know anybody like that? They're just sleeping, and oh, man. The dreams can make stuff happen. So I was in Guatemala. This is probably 10 years ago. One of my first trips to Guatemala, and we were out in the countryside, and there was these bunk beds. And these bunk beds, if you've ever been to this place where I'm talking about, you'll know exactly what I'm saying, because a few of you have been there with me. They're like 3 feet apart from each other, maybe 2 or 3 feet apart. You're right there next to somebody. Now, nowadays, we have some fans that blow, and they kind of give us some white noise, so it's all good. You know, it kind of drowns out some of the noise that's going on. But back then, all you could listen to on this countryside was like the distant sound of a bus honking its horn, because they do that constantly in Guatemala, and the sound of a rooster that crows all night. It's the devil rooster of Guatemala is what I call it, all night. And then whoever's sleeping next to you. So if you got one of these quiet people, right, one of these quiet people that doesn't snore very often, maybe a little bit here and there, right, you're good. But I did not get that person. I got the person who made it his life's mission that week to make sure I didn't sleep. Between him and the rooster, I think they ganged up on me. Now this guy, he laid there next to me. He was an adult chaperone. Now, this adult chaperone thought when we said, hey, lights out at 11, that only applied to people under the age of 18. Now, we'd been working all day. We were working hard. It was time to go to bed. We wanted to go to sleep. But at 11 o'clock, when all the kids laid down and we turned the lights off, he took that as his signal to get up, walk out to the bathroom, and start taking his shower and brushing his teeth really loudly and taking his time. And so he'd come back after that, and we were all still kind of sitting there doing this number, laying there. And he'd come back about 30 minutes later, and then he'd get in the bed, and he'd sit on the side of the bed and make a lot of noise while he was there. He had about no less than 300 bags he had to open the entire time. And they were all crinkly and then zipping and unzipping and doing this. And finally, he would lay down on the bed, and he'd lay down on his back and cross his arms like this, like a complete psychopath. And he would, I don't know if any of you sleep like that, but if you do, I'm watching you. And he would do this like a vampire or whatever, and he'd pull his sheet up. Just get like this, and he'd get comfortable. And after a few minutes, he'd fall asleep. And he was one of the 25%ers, okay? And the way he snored, I was afraid for his health. Like, I was afraid that at any moment something bad could happen. And so I was kind of keeping an ear out, like, are you all right, man? And so he'd keep snoring like that, and he would work somehow. I don't know if he was doing it with his feet or with his arms or what, but eventually his sheet would work all the way down to his feet. And when they got to his feet, it sent a signal directly to his medulla oblongata up here. And that said he had to scream with all his might. So he just, ah! I'm not kidding you, all night, over and over and over and over again. This guy is doing this number the whole time. And I thought, like, what is he dreaming about? And when he started screaming, then he'd yank the sheet back up and he'd get quiet. And it was in that next 20 seconds before he fell back to sleep, I would try to go to sleep. It was a rough week. It was a rough week. I wondered what he was dreaming about because, dreams can kind of change our mood, don't they? Like, you ever wake up from a dream and you're mad at somebody and they didn't do anything to you? It's because you dreamed they did something to you. Dreams can change a lot about the way we approach life. I used to have this recurring dream that I couldn't run. Like, I was in the middle of the dream, and it was so real to me, and I needed to do something to run really fast, but you're dreaming, and for whatever reason, I can't run in my dream, and I want so badly to dream. So whenever I have that dream, I get up really early, and then I go running, just because I need to prove to myself I still can. Yeah, dreams can be crazy, and they can cause us to do a lot of things. There was this ancient king in ancient Egypt. He had some dreams too. The king of Egypt back then was called the Pharaoh. And this dream he kept having kind of freaked him out, kind of weirded him out. So basically what happened in the dream was he goes down to the river Nile, and he's standing there, I assume as you do as the king of Egypt, surveying everything, right? The master of all you survey. And while he's standing there in his dream, he's looking at the water, appreciating just the beauty of the Nile and of Egypt. While he's standing there, these 7 fat, good-looking cows come just right out of the water. I mean, these were good-looking cows. He was looking at these things thinking, I can get a great brisket out of that bad boy. I can get some great steaks out of that one. And these cows come out of the water. They go over to the nearby reeds, and they start grazing. And while he's watching this, he hears a noise, and he turns back, and out of the same spot in the water, another set of cows, another 7 cows. But this time, they're not fat. They don't look like they would provide good steaks or anything like that. These cows are skinny. They're gaunt, even. Like, they're gaunt. And they're ugly. And they come walking out of the water, and they go to where the same spot where these fat cows were. And they go over to these fat cows, and they start eating the fat cows. That's traumatic enough, right? If you're in the middle of this dream, that's traumatic enough. And it wakes him up. He's going, what's going on? He said, I was dreaming I had the fat cows, and now the skinny cows come and eat them, and you can't even tell that they ate the fat cows. Well, like you, he has this dream, and he goes back to sleep, right? He shakes it off, goes, that was weird. Goes back to sleep. Well, while he's sleeping, he has another dream. And there are these 7 heads of grain. 7 heads of grain. And they are 7 of the best looking heads of grain he's ever seen in his entire life. And he's like, yeah, that's what happens here in Egypt. We have these great harvests because we have this beautiful river and it runs through here, and we have great workers. This is awesome. Taking it as a sign of something good to come. But then he sees these 7 really unhealthy heads of grain. They've been withered by the winds. And I don't know how this was even possible, but those second 7, the ones that looked ugly and were terrible and nasty looking, somehow consumed the 7 best-looking heads of grain he'd ever seen. That wakes him up. And he thought again, you couldn't even tell that these 7 really great-looking heads of grain had ever existed. What happened to them? Why is this going on? So he does what any king of that time would have done. He calls his court of magicians. Now, in those days in the ancient Near East, most people, most kings, most kingdoms had an entire guild of magicians. And they did everything from like medical advice to exorcisms, with a little bit of dream interpretation sprinkled in. Because in those days, when you got a dream, it wasn't having to deal with something in the past or something that you were dealing with right there in the present. It was believed that those dreams were pointing you to something in the future. Now, as an added bonus, an added little twist to the story, in ancient Egypt, the Pharaoh was seen as a god. So the Pharaoh didn't often bring anybody in to interpret the Pharaoh's dreams. Because when the Pharaoh was contacted by the gods, it was usually done through dreams, and the Pharaoh was supposed to know how to interpret those dreams. So they weren't bringing any of the magicians in and saying, hey, help me do this. But these dreams freaked him out so much that that's exactly what he does. He brings all of them in, all the wise men, all the magicians, every single one of them says, what do I do with this? None of them can answer. I'm sure they probably had something they could have made up, but they didn't want to be wrong. They said, Pharaoh, we don't know. Well, as the Pharaoh is really struggling through this, he's probably ranting and raving about it. His cupbearer, a member of his court, hears him talking about it and says, hey, I actually might know a guy. I know a guy down in the dungeon. He's kind of the head servant guy down in the dungeon. He's kind of a prisoner, but they've elevated him all up. He knows how to interpret dreams. He interpreted a dream for me one time, and he was right on. Maybe you want to bring him up here and have him do this for you. And the Pharaoh says, yeah, I'll try anything at this point. So they go and they get this man. His name is Joseph. They bring Joseph and they clean him up and they shave him, make him look like an Egyptian, because he's actually not an Egyptian. He's a Hebrew man. They bring him in front of Pharaoh, and they say, here he is, Pharaoh. And Pharaoh says, Joseph, right? Joseph says, yes. Well, Joseph, here's my dream. And he recounts the whole first dream, and he recounts the whole second dream. And then he looks at Joseph, and he says, what do you got? Can you tell me? And Joseph says, hey, I can't do this, but God can. I can't interpret this, but God can. So he's kind of giving himself some separation. This is what they would do in the courts in those days. They would say the gods are the only ones who could do this. But Joseph points to his God and says, only God can give this. I'm just listening to what God tells me. Pharaoh says, fair enough. And then Joseph goes on and says, look, your dreams came in two because God really means business here. God is warning you. Here's what's coming. You're going to have 7 years of abundance. That's the 7 fat cows. That's the 7 really good-looking heads of grain. You're going to have 7 really good years of abundance here in Egypt. But after that, you're going to have 7 years of famine. And I'm sure with that, a shudder went throughout everybody in the room. I'm sure everybody in that room shuddered. Because a famine for 1 year, 2 years was a long enough time. People died. People moved out en masse. But 7 years was enough to decimate a kingdom, enough to decimate an entire area. 7 years. So Joseph says, that's what's going to happen. And here's how I think you ought to handle it if you'll allow me. He goes on, he says, and now, let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man and put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Let him look for somebody who's wise, who is willing to do what's necessary. Somebody who won't be corrupted. Somebody who won't let somebody else pay them off so that they can have a little bit of extra grain during this time of abundance. This needs to be a wise and discerning person. He says, let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take 1/5 of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. So 20% of everything that is produced. We're going to put this all in these little spots. We're going to collect all this food. He goes on, he says, they should collect all the food of these good years that are coming up and store the grain under the authority of Pharaoh to be kept in the cities for food. Right? So this is actually a sign in the ancient world that things were going well, that you had enough leftover food that you could build these silos or these storage facilities. I mean, think about it. If you didn't have enough food, you wouldn't be building things, would you? You wouldn't be building places to store this. So you're going to have enough food, Joseph says, but you need a place to store all this because you're going to need it. And you need wise people in place, people who won't be corrupted and people who know what's at stake, who are going to do this, who are going to take 20% of everything everybody brings in from harvest. That's not going to be fun, by the way. If you're one of these commissioners, that's not going to be fun. Because you're telling people, you need to give me a fifth of your crop. They're not going to want to do that, especially in a time of abundance. He goes on, he says, this food should be held in reserve for the country. So we're saving this up. That's what we mean by a reserve. We're going to be held in reserve. We're going to save this to be used during the 7 years of famine that will come upon Egypt, so that the country may not be ruined by the famine. So we're going to save this so this place isn't decimated, so men, women, and children don't die and have to leave en masse, so that Egypt can continue to exist. Luckily, this plan seemed good to Pharaoh. We find this out. And the plan seemed good to Pharaoh and to all his officials. So Pharaoh asked them, can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God? So here's this Hebrew servant prisoner who comes in and talks to the most powerful man in the land, probably in the region and maybe even in the world at that time. This was not just some mom and pop shop kingdom. This was the Egyptian dynasty. It existed for thousands of years. This was a big deal. And this Pharaoh, this non-Hebrew, this non-Jewish man, hears from Joseph. And Joseph is saying, my God is telling me that this is about to happen. And Pharaoh listens. Pharaoh hears. Pharaoh senses the wisdom, the Spirit of God, and what God is trying to do. See, what God is trying to do, and what we find out later in Joseph's story, just not too long after this, is that what God is wanting to do is to save many lives. That's what God is after, the saving of many lives. And friends, I want to tell you this, God is still after that today. That God is after the saving of many lives. And I don't just mean in like that old school hellfire and brimstone way where you need to turn or burn or something like that. I mean, you need to give your life to Jesus. Allow yourself to be saved from that also. But also physically, God is after the saving of many lives physically among us today. There's people all around us today. It was a cold night last night. God is after the saving of many lives, even when it comes to cold weather and starvation, poverty. God is after those things. So what we learn from Joseph and what we're going to continue to explore today, but I want you to remember this as we're talking about it. The bottom line of everything is I want you to save all you can so you can save all you can. As you may know, we're in a series called If I Had $1 Million, and it's all about money, which is always a really comfortable and fun topic to talk about in church. But we're not here to beat you over the head and tell you to give us all your money or anything like that. That seems sort of illegal. But I do want to talk about the right use of money, how Christians should approach money, how followers of Jesus might most ably use the money that God supplies for them. Because again, we are managers, not owners of our money. And here's what I think. If God back then and now is really all about the saving of many lives, then the more money that we have at our disposal, the more money we can use for God's purposes, i.e., the saving of many lives. So we want to save all the money we can so that we can save all the people we can, both in a spiritual sense and a physical sense. Right? And when we're doing these things, we are partnering with God in what God is doing in the world. Isn't that incredible? Like, if you think about that, the God of the universe invites you, with all your failures, with all your flaws, with all my failures, all my flaws, all the things I do, God invites us to participate in the fixing, in the making right of this world. And one of the ways we get to do that is with our money. So last week we said it's our responsibility to use the gifts and the talents that God has given us to earn all the money we can so that we can use that money for God's purposes. Now, once we earn all the money we can, we need to make sure that we are saving all the money we can too. Right? We need to make sure we're saving all the money we can so that eventually we can give away as much money as we can. We're going to talk about that next week. But in order to do that, we've got to be able to save some money. So the question becomes, how do we save all we can? What does it mean to save all we can? What does that even look like? Well, I've got some options for you, some things I want you to think about. The first thing I want you to think about when it comes to saving all you can is this. Don't waste your money. Don't waste your money. Right? How many people you know, right? How many people you know, they just waste money. They just waste it. And they don't know where it goes at all, right? They probably, let's just say they have a $200,000 income in their household. The household income is $200,000, and they get to the end of the month and they go, I have no idea where that just went. I have no idea where that just went. Why do I have $10 in my checking account? I've got $70 in savings. You know people like this. In fact, studies show that the majority of Americans can't pay for a $1,000 emergency that pops up in their life. That's crazy. A lot of us, we waste our money. We decide we're going to go on trips every weekend, or we're going to go and eat out here, and we're going to do this, and then we're going to just drop money on this thing that we're never going to use again. Don't waste your money is the first thing I'll tell you. Because listen to this. When you waste your money, you are effectively wasting your life. Here's why. Every hour you work, you get paid for that hour, right? Something along that line. So let's do a little bit of math, and y'all don't make fun of me if I mess this up, because I'm doing it on my head. Let's do a little bit of math. Let's say that you make $4,000 in a paycheck, so every 2 weeks, $4,000. And in that time, you've worked 80 hours. So some of my math whizzes help me out here. 80 hours for $4,000. How much am I making an hour there? 50? $50 an hour? That's pretty good. Wouldn't you like to make $50 an hour? $50 an hour, huh? Okay, so say then I decide to go on a weekend getaway. And I spend $300 on a room and or a little house, and then $200 on food for that weekend. That's $500. That's 10 hours of my life, right? 10 hours of my life. And if I do that every weekend in that month, that's 40 hours of my life. Now, I'm not saying don't go and do nice things. I'm not saying go and have fun. I'm not trying to be judgmental, and I'm not trying to be hurtful about that. I'm just saying make sure you aren't wasting your money, and as a result, also wasting your life doing stuff like that. So that's the first thing. The second one is don't spend more money than you have to. Don't spend more money than you have to. A lot of us, we could be just fine going to eat at Outback, but instead, we're going to places way fancier than that, and we're doing it a lot. And then we look up at the end of everything and we go, where'd all my money go? Where'd all my money go? All right, we'll spend a lot of money on a lot of things. Now, I'm not saying don't treat yourself. I'm not saying don't treat others. But I am saying when it stops, let me put it this way. Every day, my daughter comes home from school and she goes, Dad, can I have a treat? It's not really a treat. And at this point, it's a snack. You ask me every day, if I give you one, it's never a treat, right? And she'll say, Dad, what's the surprise today? Because one time I surprised her. Dad, what's the surprise today? Well, it's not a surprise if I do something every day. It's the same thing. Like go to Christner's. Enjoy that place. I love Christner's. It's great. If you ever want to take me, I'll go, right? Go to Christner's. Go to those places. But when you do it every night, it stops being a treat. Some of us, we do this with our homes. We do this with the way we decorate our houses every month. We redecorate our houses, buy new furniture, and do this. And there's nothing wrong with making your house be a place that is great for you to come home and be in. And it's like your little nest with your family or whatever. But if you're redecorating your house every other week, that can be a problem. Here's the third thing. Don't buy things just to impress people. You wouldn't do this, but some people would. We buy things we don't need to impress people we don't even like. You ever think about that? Whether it be clothes or cars or houses or this or that. We'll buy all this stuff and we'll think it's going to make people enjoy us and like us and be impressed by us and we'll go further in life and we'll be happier. But it doesn't. It doesn't. Because no matter what we get, it's never enough. See, the truth is, with all of these things, we have to put a stop to it early on, right when we see it coming. Because if we don't, when we feed these desires, they grow. They just continue to grow. And before long, it's really hard to shake off that greed. And you know you're not saving as much as you possibly could to be used for God's purposes, which is the saving of many lives. So let's put this in practical terms. You may or may not know who Dave Ramsey is. I'm kind of a fan. I want you to know that I'm gonna borrow from him real quick and tell you some things because his program really helped me. If you've never heard of him, I'd encourage you to check him out, or I'll talk to you about it afterwards. But his program really helped me about 10 years ago or so to really figure out a game plan for how to remove things from my life when it came to finances and get headed in the direction I want to go. So let me tell you the first thing. This is my advice. This is not from the Bible. This is just my advice to you in a practical sense of how you can begin saving all you can. Here's the first one. Save a $1,000 emergency fund. Save up as much money as you can to get to $1,000. Keep doing that. Try to get to a $1,000 emergency fund. That's because, like, sometimes your transmission goes out, or sometimes you got this crazy doctor's bill out of nowhere. And you got that $1,000 emergency fund, you can pay it and not think twice. Then build it back up if you have to. The second thing I'd say is pay off all your debt except for your house. This is what we call consumer debt. Right? I mean, I don't know if you've ever had a lot of credit card debt or a car payment and then this payment and this payment, but there's so much stress that gets added in on top of that. Gets added in on top of you whenever you have those things. When you can remove that type of debt from your life, man, you're feeling breezy then. You're feeling real breezy. So first, $1,000 emergency fund. Then we want to pay off all debt. And then we want to save 3 to 6 months of expenses, just in case something happens, i.e. a pandemic. You've got money in the bank to do that. Now, that's different for everybody, depending on where you live and what you spend money on. But we're talking like the basics here, right? We're talking food, mortgage, electricity, stuff like that. 3 to 6 months of expenses. I go for 6 personally because I'm just that guy. Here's the last one. Put away 15% for retirement. Once you've done these first 3, get to this 4th one. Put away 15% for retirement. Make sure that you're doing that. You will have to retire most likely one day. Here's why I'm telling you all this. Because if you can do this, you're creating margin in your life to help others. You're removing the stress of every time somebody comes to you, you see somebody in need. You're removing the stress of thinking, do I have enough money to help them? If you can get this stuff, most of the time you'll be able to step in and be the hands and feet of Jesus right in that moment. But what I know is so many of us, we live paycheck to paycheck. These are studies we've seen. So many of us live paycheck to paycheck, and we could never help anybody else if we wanted to. You know, when you give at Church on the Drive, that's exactly what you're doing. You're helping other people. I can't tell you how many times we're paying for kids to have food at schools. A lot of times we're paying to help homeless people get food at the Christian Service Center. We're paying to help them get necessary mental health things that they need done. That's what your giving goes towards. So my prayer for you, as we kind of close it down, that you would see that there are some areas in your life where saving all you can will help you save all you can. That by saving all you can, you're partnering with God and you're setting yourself up to further partner with God. That you would remember you are a manager, not an owner of the money that's been given to you. So normally at the end of the message, I pray and I ask you to raise your hand and all that. But what I want you to do today, we're going to respond a little bit differently. Willie's going to play us some music, but we've got some stations. Maybe you came in, you came in and you saw the different stations all around the room. We got these are prayer stations. We've got descriptors there and instructions there. I want you to go to each of these in a moment when I release you and do them. Like, just do what's on the paper. We got 2 up here, and we got 4 in the back. Go check them out. Go do some of those things. Let it be a time. Let it be a time for you. We're going to do that. If you're in the room or you're online and you can't move around very well, you can't do that, what I want you to do, we're going to put some instructions on the screens for you, but I want you to focus on this picture of Jesus behind me. And I want you to pray. If it's hard for you to move around, we've got something for you too. And then when Casey's going to sing for us at the end, she'll bring us all back. And I want you to just come back from wherever you're at, if you're ready, and we'll all sing a song together to kind of close out our time. All right? All right. Let's go ahead.